As some of you may know, a few weeks ago I did my Dragonic Overlord deck profile for the Cardfight Vanguard standard format with the updated VEB07 cards, and I loved it. It's one of my favorite decks right now to play in this format, but a close second, if not first, is this Dragonic Blademaster Dragonic Overlord hybrid deck that I built and I've been working on for the past couple of weeks. I really like the way that it plays, and I've honestly seen a lot of success with it. I've won 2 back-to-back locals going undefeated against various decks like Bermuda Triangle, Nova Grappler, Oracle Think Tank, and even Kagero mirror matches, but not necessarily Blademaster mirror matches. So the deck has been showing a lot of progress. I've probably won over 80% of my games with this deck, and I've played probably close to 100 games with this deck already in the past coming weeks. I have a lot of confidence in it, and hopefully you guys like it. If you do, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And hey, click that bell for notifications so that way you guys know when my videos go live for you. We do all kinds of deck profiles and TCG tips here on this channel, so why not subscribe so that way you guys can know when all the new videos come out. Anywho, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this deck profile of Dragonic Blademaster and Dragonic Overlord the Great. Alright everyone, here we are in card fight area. Let's go ahead and check out this deck. Alright, so we got, for starters, let me just outright here and say I like the utility that this deck has. You know, when you play Overlord, you feel like you have utility in the sense that you have this very aggressive play style in Dragonic Overlord the End, or this very kind of advantage-based pressure style in Dragonic Overlord the Great, which those feel like two, you know, different things that gives you many options. Really, they're both based around advantage and pressuring your opponent. Blademaster is more of a combo deck. You know, I like to call it because you need to have certain pieces in play. It plays a little bit differently than you might think Kagero decks do. And also, it just has a really blowout effect, which, believe it or not, to have like this really powerful just blowout board wipe effect in Kagero right now is kind of refreshing. It's kind of nice to be like, oh yeah, I can just do this busted thing during my turn instead of this, oh, I'm going to be attacking you 5 times every single turn. Can you deal with that? If the answer is no, then you're going to lose. You know, that feels really broken, but in like a one-turn blowout scenario, it really doesn't do anything. Blademaster though can turn the shift of a game in like that. It's kind of insane. So let's go ahead and talk about Blademaster. If you guys don't know what this card does, he came out in VEB07. If your opponent has no rear guards, this unit gets power plus 5k and plus 1 critical during your turn or during your opponent's turn. Now, a lot of people forget that. So if your opponent has no rear guards and they just swing with a Vanguard, you're actually an 18k base. So keep that in mind. It does come up sometimes, so be sure you know that. His second effect is act once per turn. Super cool. If Wyvern Strike Doha and Wyvern Strike Garen are on your rearguard circle, cost Soul Blast 1 grade 3 and discard 2 cards from your hand, retire all of your opponent's rearguards, and call a vision token to rearguard circle at the end of that turn. Retire that vision token. Vision token is a grade 3 power plus 13k, critical plus 1, and it can attack with twin drive. It is busted. Okay, so let's talk about this card for a second. He gives you that multiple drive checks, which is very pressuring to your opponent. He has that kind of cost to it, which is discarding cards, which I've talked about is kind of, you know, Kagero's thing. They gain all this advantage in the early game or kind of indirectly with your opponent by retiring their rear guards and keeping their board, and then they use that advantage to power skills like this one that gets them multiple drive checks and creates pressure. That's the whole deal. This card, though, also adds to the whole control/disruption aspect, and that it board wipes your opponent. The second they realize you're playing Blademaster in their deck, the moment they call more than 5 units, or more than 3 units for that matter, this card becomes so worth it, it's not even funny. Also, what's really funny to me is that people don't know that his continuous works the first time you ride him. A very common thing that a lot of people do when they play against Kagero is they won't really call a board until they ride to grade 3 because they don't want early cards like Berserk Dragon or Kimnara or Bar or whatever retire their units. So sometimes if they don't know you're playing Blademaster, and they'll just keep their board empty. And so on my first grade 3 ride, I'll ride Blademaster, pressure a crit, or even 3 crits if I go Force 2 on my first grade 3 ride of the game. If they have no counterblast, they're going to guard my Vanguard swing. Say I check a crit or 2, and then my rear guard they have to guard, and now they have no damage, no cards in hand, and they can't do anything on their turn. So this is actually a very pressuring card in the early game, even though technically his effect does not work until you have a grade 3 in Soul, which, by the way, there's some funny combos that can make that happen earlier that I'll get into later. Anyway, I really do like this card. A lot of people are big fans of this card, but not really many people are trying to play the deck like this. Everyone thinks the best way to play Blademaster is with that Blademaster support card that searches for grade 3s and also blows up units. Yes, that card's really good. Yes, that adds to the whole generic aspect of Blademaster, but I think the real power could be in that this card adds more options to a deck like Dragonic Overlord the Great. So let's talk about Dragonic Overlord the Great. The reason why he's our backup grade 3 and not the end and not regular Overlord are because, frankly, regular Overlord isn't powerful enough to justify being like your backup, you know, ace card, so I don't use him. The end, yes, the end is in theory more powerful in the early game because you can ride him first, and he actually has an effect that, unlike Dragonic Overlord the Great and unlike Blademaster, but that effect only triggers if you play your whole hand down, which sometimes you don't want to do, because if you play a Doha and a Garen too early, your opponent can get rid of them, and then you can't get them back later, so that doesn't really work out too well. Plus, in the late game, you have to have an Overlord in your soul, not just a generic grade 3 like the Great here, to use your effect. So it kind of adds less to the consistency of your hybrid build. So I went with what I thought was the most consistent grade 3, and it's worked out great. Yes, our grade 3 first ride is not that threatening, but frankly, it doesn't have to be. Our late game is so powerful and so consistent that I just don't care. And sometimes you can do cute little things. So like if I rush early with a Neoflame or Gar with one early, I do get value out of riding Dragonic Overlord the Great first because I get a Neoflame back. And to me, that's good enough to do on my first grade 3 ride, especially if I went first. Secondly, like I said before, if I ride Blademaster first and my opponent has no rear guards, he's a crit threader on the first ride of the game. That's pretty good to me in a 4-set that eventually will just get more and more powerful as the game goes on. So frankly, I'm not buying into that whole, oh, your first ride's gotta be busted in this format kind of thing. No. When Gancelot comes out, maybe I'll have a different attitude, in that Gancelot's pretty busted when you ride him first. But for now, I think it works just fine. We all know what he does. Neoflame's broken, restands, 5 attacks and force, busted. Moving on, we got our grade 2s. We're playing something super simple, super consistent. This has turned out to be the best way to play them. We got Doha, we got Neoflame, we got Berserk Dragon. I messed around with all kinds of things. I tried Full Armored Buster to get more consistency with searching for your overlords. Didn't really pan out so great. I wanted Nahalem in here actually for more rearguard snipes, so that way you can probably try and trigger Blademaster without needing to retire the whole board. And it was pretty clunky, and I tried running like less of Neoflame and like some other niche grade 2s that like this like Dragon Knight guy that like gains 10k if you have a grade 3 rear guard. It didn't really go anywhere. This is the most consistent and honestly the best. We all know what Neoflame does. We all know what Berserk Dragon does at this point. But Doha's a new character here. We got Wyvern Strike Doha. He's first of all necessary for the Dragonic Blademaster like package. Like he comes along with it no matter what. But his effect is when placed from hand, cost. Counterblast 1, search your deck for up to 1 Wyvern Strike Garen and call it to a rearguard circle. So you guys know Blademaster requires Doha and Garen. So if you just have Doha in your hand, you actually have the whole combo already. Also, getting a free unit in a Kagero deck is kind of cool. It's basically the same thing as retiring an opponent's unit, but instead of just like taking a card away from them, you're actually gaining a card yourself, which is more proactive, and it's just nice. His second ability, though, is honestly super busted. During the battle it attacked, if your opponent has no rear guards, your opponent cannot call normal units from his or her hand to Guardian Circle. So it's a Silent Tom effect. Forces the opponent to guard with triggers. What's really cool is Garen has an ability that gains 5k when your opponent has no rear guards. So this column, say you boosted Garen with Doha, which is the best way to do it, he swings for 22. Your opponent, say they're a Force Clan, has to guard with a trigger unit when they could have just guarded with 10k. Well, that's super cool. Like, you're forcing more guard out of your opponent without actually necessarily needing a Force marker. So in a sense, this continuous ability acts like a Force marker in that it sometimes forces more guard out of your opponent than it might have would have otherwise. So I really like Doha as this pressuring card. Using him early game is really cool too because Garen has an on-hit skill that you can almost always trigger if you call him early. I don't recommend calling Doha early unless you have another Doha in your hand. There are some problems with fighting this card. That's why we play the full 4 of him and not the full 4 of Garen, because Garen, first of all, not that many decks have back row retire in this format right now, so don't really worry too much about like losing your Garen if you commit it early. So I don't really have a problem with that. Second, you only need him like really one time to come out of nowhere, which is where the Blademaster like package kind of really shines. But I like playing for Doha because he's the necessary piece. Because if you have him, you have everything else probably. So that's really good. We got 4 Neoflame, 4 Berserk Dragon, like I said. Moving on to the grade 1s, probably the weirdest grade 1 package I've ever played in Kagero, but I really do like it, and it's been uber consistent. So we got the 4 Ammo, standard. We got 3 Sable Dragon. That's 1 less than I normally would like, but we had to cut room for Garen and this next card that I love, which is Red Die Griffin. I talked about how broken this card was in the Dragonic Overlord, the end deck profile I did for you guys, but it's even more busted in this deck because A, it's better than that grade 1 that you play. I think he's kind of like Wyvern Strike something. What he does is if your opponent has no rearguard circles, no rearguards, they must guard with 2 cards from their hand during this battle. That's great and really powerful. But Red Die Griffin is better because he works better with both Blademaster and with Overlord. So, what he does is if you don't know, auto, when your opponent's Guardian is placed during the battle that it boosted a Vanguard, talking about this card, Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's Guardians, retire it, and at the end of that battle, retire this unit. So, what's crazy is if your opponent ever, and I mean ever, guards with something that's not a PG, and they go for like a 2 to pass, the second they go, I'm done guarding, you go, cool, get rid of that one thing, now I'm hitting, you lose, and you're like, and they're like, oh yeah, I did. And it's hilarious because people just forget this card exists. I will boost my Vanguard for like 36k plus 1 critical, and I'll swing at their Vanguard, and they won't PG it. They just go 2 to pass, and I go, oh, no, it's not. Retire, Red Die Griffin, Soul Blast 1, get rid of your thing. It's hilarious, and it's really powerful. But what's even better is when people know what he does. So not only can you catch people by surprise, but what's really cool is when you play him, he's essentially another card out of your opponent's hand every time you attack. Because the one time that they don't go like 3 to pass or no pass, you know, that's the time that you're like, oh, now you lose. Because I'll never pop this off to make a no pass a 2 to pass. That's stupid. I'll always pop this off to make a 2 to pass a hit, and I'll never pop it off if my opponent just like says no guard, obviously. Well, I can't pop it off if they say no guard, but you guys get the idea, right? This forces a card out of your opponent's hand almost always when you play it. And another cool thing that it does is it allows other things to be just kind of like niche and cool. Like, for example, turn 2, I've talked about how I'll ride Sable Dragonute, and if I have Red Die Griffin in my hand, I'll just boost Sable Dragonute and attack my opponent's Vanguard, and if they drop like a heal trigger, I'll just kill it and then get a +1 and then possibly like a crit. Like, it's hilarious. People think that they can like outplay you. He can boost anything, doesn't have to be a grade 3. So Red Die Griffin is a busted card. I think it's better than the Wyvern Strike card because the Wyvern Strike card is good because it forces your opponent just to like lose, which is great. But it's a base case. It's a best case scenario. It only works with Blademaster, and I don't think it does enough. I think this is a constant threat to your opponent's hand, and it can work for both Blademaster and Overlord the Great. Now, keep in mind, it does need to boost. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll attack with Overlord and I'll boost it first, because the second attack with Overlord generally is more powerful than the first one. So I'll boost it first, force him to PG the first one, apply triggers wherever I want, and then attack again with the next one. And sometimes this deck actually has a lot of counterblast conservation, so I'll like use Neoflame and like add a crit to my Great and just party on my opponent, and it's hilarious. And I almost always go strictly Force 1 in this deck, so being able to like add crits out of nowhere is super awesome. Alright, last grade 1, we have Wyvern Strike Garen during your turn, plus 5k if your opponent has no rearguards. Like I said, this is actually pretty cool because it can attack. So it's like a 23k column with a force marker, which comes in handy a lot. And the second ability is, well, honestly, the best thing about this card is when the attack it boosted, Wyvern Strike Doha hits, Counterblast 1, draw a card, and Soul Charge 1. You almost have this exclusively boosting Doha, but it can hit anything. And sometimes, if you go second, and like I said, you can like aggro with Doha, you get cards to your hand, and you can Soul Charge. If you ever Soul Charge a grade 3, you're freaking on fire. That's the best game ever. Okay, that's the most high rolling thing ever. It happened like once or twice in testing, and it's busted. Because then you just have the pick of the litter of what you want to do on your first grade 3 ride. Board wipe your opponent, or get an automatic restand with the Great on turn 1 of grade 3 ride. That is freaking busted, dude. So Garen, huge shout out to him for being able to Soul Charge. I always thought it was a counter charge, but no, it's a Soul Charge. Even better in my opinion. Finally, we have the trigger lineup, which this is again a thing that I talked about in my end profile, but I think 6/6 is currently the way to go in Overlord or in Kagero right now. But this deck for different reasons. First of all, in the end, I said it was because you can go either Force 1 or Force 2. In this deck, like I said, I almost always exclusively go Force 1 because you already have crit pressure with Blademaster. Second, you want your rearguards to be pressuring and that you have a vision token that can twin drive. If you twin drive for 13k, that's not that scary. If you twin drive for 23k, that's pretty scary. So that's why I like going Force 1. Second, I think the Great overall works better with Force 1. I've talked about that at length in multiple Know Your Matchups as well as in my deck profiles. So I don't really like going Force 2 with him. Plus, being able to stack, Force 1s on Neoflame is busted. So always do that. And the next thing is that the draw trigger is actually super nice because unlike the Great, you don't need to have cards in your hand to get his restand skill off. His Twin Drive will be sufficient enough. But for Blademaster, you actually need the cards in your hand before you use the effect, which is a big deal. So when you plan out your Blademaster turns, make sure that you have at least 2 cards extra on top of like the possible Doha that you need in order that so that way you can actually pay the cost for the effect versus just have the ability to use the effect. So make sure you keep that little stuff in mind. Having the 6 draw trigger makes that advantage more possible game to game. And I am actually playing a weird 6 crit lineup. I'm playing 3 Tar, 2 Angerhorn Dragon, and then 1 Rakshasha because I want people to think that I'm playing like 12 crit, and sometimes it works and it's hilarious. So do this just to mess with your opponent. Finally, we got 4 PGs, 2 draws, 4 heals, and then I'm playing Undu. Notice in the last one I was playing the Wyvern Strike Kid. In this one I'm playing Undu because I never want my opponent to think that I'm not playing Overlord, because if your opponent never knows Blademasters in your deck, you can catch them such by surprise, which is awesome in this format right now. But if you want to play Wyvern Strike Doja or something, go right ahead. He's adorable. But anyway, guys, that kind of does it for this deck profile. I really like this deck right now. I think it's literally, like, it's probably the strongest way to play Kagero right now because it gives you the most options of any Kagero deck that I've played thus far. But I think the end is still really powerful, and to be fair with you guys, in my testing against the mirror, like against like an Overlord deck, I've come out positive. I've beaten it more than it's beaten me. I think I'm like 80-20 in terms of like record against other Overlord decks, like mono Overlord decks. So I don't know what that means. It means this deck's pretty cool because vision tokens are so strong, you guys. So good. You like, until you use one, you have no idea, like you can't really grasp what I'm talking about. So definitely give this deck a try if you haven't already. By the way, it's super cheap. Like if you already have your greats, like Blademaster's like what, $2 I think. Like go get them now. Like he can only get better, and he's so fun to use sometimes. Like being able to board wipe is so good right now, dude. This card blows up Melody, man. Blows it up out of the water. It's so much fun. But anyway, guys, that kind of does it for this deck profile. If you guys have any questions for me, don't be afraid to leave them down in the comments below. Or like I said, come into my Twitch channel. I go live every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon Pacific Standard Time. I would love to see you guys in there, and we can chat about Cardfight Vanguard or really just hang out. I honestly would just love to have you guys in there. Links to all that stuff down in the description below. Don't be afraid to let me know what you guys think. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like. If we hit 15 likes by this Thursday, I will do a gameplay demonstration video for this deck, just in case you guys have some lingering questions about like, what do I do when like I'm stuck with like 4 Dohas in my hand and I can't do anything? Like, do I commit them? Like, what do I do? You know, those kind of questions are very easily answered by gameplay demonstration videos. So if you guys want one, leave a like by Thursday. Bada bing, bada boom. And you guys, that wraps it up for me. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for enjoying the video. Always remember to work hard, rest easy, and live well. I have been your TrueChampionSteven. Peace out.